Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode, I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. So we were just discussing off mic before we hit the record button here today that there are some bad people in pro wrestling, okay? And we don't have to go into it too awful much on the negative side, but let me just tell you right now, if you're not a fan, or if you haven't watched in a long time, or maybe you don't follow that much, you're just casual, if such a thing exists anymore as a casual wrestling fan, or if you're a lifer, then you know, trust me when I tell you, there's some bad people in wrestling, male and female, because look, there's bad people in real life. And pro wrestling, that world's full of real people doing unreal things and acting in ways that would be embarrassing and illegal in some cases, and creating moments you never want to watch again and you wish you hadn't seen the first time. But when it comes to good guys in pro wrestling, there's a lot of those people too. And so as the bad guys get the press, it's good to look at the guys who are doing it right and who have great reputations and who people generally love to work with and have nothing but good things to say about. And that's who we're talking about here today. We're talking about Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon, the guy who came up in Ring of Honor on the independent scene, became a smash hit in WWE, despite that company really not wanting him to be a smash hit. And now he's considered the best in the world by a lot of fans out there during his AEW run of the past several years. We're going to talk a little bit about every stage of his career and try to keep this under 6 hours. We'll talk about a guy that'll have his own documentary one of these days. It should be Bryan Danielson because, man, the story's awesome. And again, if you're a fan, you know he's a good guy. And man, is he good in the ring. Great storyteller. Let's get into it. Bryan Danielson, born May 22nd, 1981, is an American professional wrestler. He is currently signed to All Elite Wrestling, AEW, where he performs under his real name and is current AEW World Champion. In his first reign, he is also known for his tenure in WWE, where he performed under the ring name of Daniel Bryan from 2010 to 2021. I did not know it had been that long. Noted for his technical wrestling style and popularity with fans, he is widely regarded as one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. As we said before, he came up in Ring of Honor. He joined in 2002, wrestling the main event of the promotion's first event, considered a mainstay in RH. He stayed with the company until 2009, when the RH World Championship and RH Pure Championship once each. Then in 2022, he was named as part of the inaugural class at the RH Hall of Fame. So yes, a solid background, an accomplished career, a guy who's done a little bit of everything and continues to do a little bit of everything. That's Bryan Danielson, and that's the lowdown on Bryan Danielson. So Phil, as we get started here today, Bryan Danielson is the AEW World's Heavyweight Champion. We can start here and kind of work our way backward. What do you think overall about Danielson as a worker, as a star, and in combination of that, what do you think about this current run in All Elite Wrestling?
Yeah, I think there's always like one guy in wrestling that is just special. He just makes you feel something. It's not just he's going out there and doing the matches. It's just something about him that he just has this energy to him that just makes you feel good. And Bryan is just one of those guys. Like he's just got this aura to him that you want to root for this guy no matter what. And I think coming into AEW, he had built up this even this aura as an underdog. Like he was the ultimate underdog in WWE in this land of giants. And so you kind of forget, no, this guy is an incredible technical wrestler, fantastic striker, and all these other things. And I love the idea that he came to AEW as a guy that's like, no, I'm not an underdog here. I'm going to come in and I'm going to beat everybody. I'm going to come in and kick some heads in. And straight away, that first year, that run of TV matches he was having was just incredible. I mean, I was there for his debut at All Out 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but just sitting in a room with and watching him do his first scrum that night and then go on and have like these incredible matches, the Kenny Omega match at Grand Slam, the Suzuki match, uh, just incredible matches that year, and then getting into that second year and being plagued by injuries, but still also having fantastic matches. For my money, I think he's been a part of four of the best AEW World Championship matches ever. The two Hangman matches were incredible. The MJF match, the Iron Man match at Revolution, also very, very good. Um, and then, of course, his match this year at All In, where he won the belt, which was a masterpiece.
Mm. We were both there that night when he came in because that was Punk's first match back
Yes.
in 2021. Did you have any indication that we were going to see? Because we saw Adam Cole that night for the first time too. Did you have any indication that we were going to see Danielson that night?
Well, I remember coming into that night that a lot of us thought we're gonna get a debut at this show. Either it's gonna be Adam Cole or it's gonna be Bryan.
Mm.
I did not think that it would be both, but um, when Cole came out and the way that they were setting it up, and there was still time left, I was like, "Oh, we might get Bryan still too." And so when his music hits at the end, I was like, "No way!"
Crazy, man. I lost my voice for the next 2 days because just hoarse screaming and enjoying the show. It was a shocker, man, for sure. The shocker. What do you think Danielson brings to this company? Like, we were talking off mic about this whole rumors of Shane McMahon thing, possibly doing business with AEW. And kids, that's very much still a rumor as we record this. Who knows what the future may hold? But my point about McMahon's always been, what does he bring to the table? How does he move the needle, or does he? And what does he bring you don't already have? What does Danielson bring to AEW that you think other people in that locker room do not already have, perhaps?
Well, I mean, he brings immediate star power because he wrestled on one of the biggest stages in the entire industry with
Mm.
WWE. But also he just brings this sensibility to the company as one of the ROH originals. Well, or at least not original, but one of the guys that is synonymous with that company. Uh, and so, for a company that is an extension of ROH in a lot of ways, I mean, All In was booked around like the infrastructure of Ring of Honor, and a lot of those wrestlers worked with Ring of Honor. Um, So I think bringing him in, having somebody that has this history with Ring of Honor, has this history of being a part of an alternative company. It's kind of like bringing in Sting when you brought in Sting. He's Sting for like a lack of coming up with anybody else, and there probably is nobody else. Is the best wrestler that has ever been outside of that company. There is nobody else that had to run outside of WWE that you could bring in that solidifies your company. And I feel like Bryan, in a lot of ways, despite his success with WWE, and you look at all of these other things that people think of when they think of him, he makes a lot of sense to bring in. I mean, if you could have got him as a day one guy, man, how different that company would have been.
Oh, dude. A lot of the issues that you and I always talk about, the fact that there doesn't seem to be a lot of cohesion in the locker room, guys go to each other instead of going to a leader. Like, dude, Danielson's that guy for them, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, we got some controversy around that coming out of last year and him
Sure.
being a part of the advisory committee.
It's no secret that you're alluding to CM Punk, of course. It's no secret that he and Punk, at least it appears to be, that they've always been friendly. Don't know if
Mhm.
what we call them BFFs. What's the relationship now between them, you think?
I think that they were still friends by the time he left. I just think Brian felt like what's best for this company is that we move on.
Mm.
And I think he just advised based on what he thought is best for AEW, regardless if they're friends or not. And I would assume that Punk didn't take it personally. Of course, I don't know either of these guys, but just based off what we've read about the whole situation.
I mean, I don't know them either, but I think that's maybe a safe bet. Like, business is business after all. Like, things happened, and Danielson was trusted for his advice and his insight and his seniority because, again, like you said, time served. It really does make an impact that he was on WWE's big stage, right? And like a lot of those guys, when they jump, well, I don't want to say jump ship. This isn't the Monday Night Wars kids, but when they sign with WWE, I'm sorry, with AEW, a lot of the initial, oh, here we go, WWE guys, which I hate. I've always hated. But people didn't really do that to Danielson, did they?
No. But I feel like it's hard to specifically call him a WWE guy because he has so much cachet as an indie wrestler. He has so
Mm.
much there's so much about his career that is linked to Ring of Honor and so many other things. So it's hard for me to outright say he's a WWE guy. He's the ultimate indie success story that managed to succeed there. And that rarely happens. It doesn't always happen for everybody that has that kind of success as an indie wrestler. And
Mm.
so I just have a hard time calling him a WWE wrestler. Every time someone says that, I kind of cringe like, no, not Brian. You can't call him a WWE wrestler.
Well, he did leave on good terms, and he left on such good terms that he stood in an AEW ring putting over the other company. And I remember that promo. Remember that where he was getting booed? Not he was getting booed, but what he was saying was getting booed. He was just laughing it off like it was fine. I'm thinking, man, with all the stuff came out about Vince, that maybe doesn't age too well. But he definitely hasn't burned any bridges. And, it begs the question, you and I think have different opinions on this. And Tony Khan seems to believe this guy is going nowhere. Do you foresee a day when he goes to WWE for any reason besides Hall of Fame?
No, I don't see him going back. I think that he did everything that he wanted to do there. He had great success there. But when you look at currently what he's doing with AEW creatively in ring, this feels more in line with what he's always wanted to do.
Mm.
Just from, I mean, when you look at currently what he's been doing in this last run of his career, the big matches he's had, being able to go to Japan, um, being able to play into some stuff like strangling somebody on television, which notoriously got him fired. Um, no, this just feels like everything I've always wanted to do. This is always what I wanted to do as a wrestler and as a entertainer.
Kicking people's effing heads in. Boy, that thing got over, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, what a great run it's been. I mean,
Yeah.
I would have never assumed that he would be able to have this kind of run with AEW because at one point we thought he was done with wrestling altogether. And just the story of him coming back to wrestling is incredible alone. But just this run of him being able to, like I said, go and have these kind of big matches with wrestlers from AEW and being able to go to Japan and wrestle Okada and wrestle Zack Sabre Jr. and being able to this year have the big match with Nigel and having a match with Swerve at Wembley. Just a magical run, man.
Yeah, and what you're alluding to is when he left, or sorry, when it was announced that he came out, cut that promo, and there's that photo of Bree trying to comfort him backstage when he's just falling to tears. And I don't want to get my timeline wrong, but I think his dad had just passed away. Wasn't that part of that story too?
I don't remember. I don't remember how close that was to him retiring.
Seems like it was fairly close, but man, that announcement, Phil, I remember it being a surprise. I don't know that they even let that out of the bag. Like,
Yeah,
because I remember that promo he was talking about. He was it his right arm. He said he couldn't feel it. He couldn't lift something. He would drop it or whatever. And he's like, okay, if I can't support weight, then I can't do this anymore.
yeah.
Oof, what a night, man. Crazy.
Very, very sad to watch him have to retire. We've
Yeah.
seen a bunch of wrestlers have to retire before they were ready. Brian was very hard to watch. Of course, we know that he has a history of neck and head injuries. And at the time, if you're telling me that this is what he feels like he needs to do to have a healthy life, then I accepted that. But it was very, very sad to watch. Just knowing how much he loves pro wrestling, and it came through not just when he was on screen, but in that moment of telling everyone that he had to give up the thing that he loved the most.
Mm.
Um, very, very sad. But it made so many other things that he got to do after that even more meaningful. And if you're one of those people that believes in fate and that things are supposed to happen the way they're supposed to happen, his career path is absolute proof of that. I mean, because he did have like the success. I mean, coming straight in and being a part of NXT, doing the stuff with the Miz,
Mm.
which is divisive, but still coming in and having the run he did that led up to the Yes movement, uh, Team Hell No, and all the stuff he had before that. But just like that time period before that, and even when Punk was there as world champion, and he had that brief run where they both were world champion. Uh, their match at Over the Limit, which is one of my favorite WWE matches of all time. But yeah, just everything that came into the Yes movement and how that culminated at WrestleMania 30, and man, one of the greatest WrestleMania moments of all time. But not being able to ever fully celebrate any of those moments because it always seemed like there was an obstacle afterwards.
Mm.
Having that great moment and then having injuries that hampered that reign, or coming back and winning the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania and then injuries hampering that reign again. Um, and then ultimately having to retire because of the injuries. And I mean, boy, if you've seen that video of the injury that probably ultimately led to an end to his first run with WWE, and the way he hits that barricade in the neck, the way his neck um, compresses, it looks awful.
Mm.
It makes me think like, yeah, maybe you can sit out for a while because it looks so bad. And I mean, I've seen it a bunch of times, and it still just never gets any easier to watch.
Yeah, and look, what we're talking about here was the right arm going numb. He did have neck surgery. He had a couple of different moments of stepping away from the ring, and I remember Phil. There was this push. He was really pushing to come back, and he had, if I'm remembering correctly, like two doctors say yes, but WWE's physician said no, so he wasn't allowed to come back. And like they kept him on. To their credit, they kept him and he became SmackDown general manager. And this guy, for whatever reason, probably always going to be tied to the Miz in some weird way because of all the, the NXT would, but later became the developmental brand was just a show, like a reality, quote unquote reality show, of course, and all that nonsense. But at least we got him out of it in the very beginning. But look, the Team Hell No stuff, we got to talk about that because Kane, who this day isn't anybody to cheer for, if I'm
Yeah.
being honest. But at the time, dude, they made some of the best TV as a wrestling fan I have flat out ever seen. Entertaining, funny, and did it get Kane over? I guess, but man, it did wonders for the guy that we call Daniel Bryan. Man, what do you think about all that stuff with Kane?
Yeah, I thought the Team Hell No stuff was a lot of fun. I thought that was one of those mismatch tag teams that actually worked out. We got a lot of great things out of it, like the counseling segments that were a lot
Mm.
of fun.
Dr. Shelby.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, that was fun. And then him saying no, which led to yes. That was awesome. I always thought the best tag team name would have been Anger Management, but maybe that's me.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
doesn't quite have the same ring to it as Team Hell No.
I guess. Yeah.
But yeah, of course, that the Money in the Bank cash in,
Hmm.
which inadvertently started the Yes movement because that was the first time started doing the celebration of him over celebrating and doing the Yes, and that heel run of him as champion was so great. And then of course that led to the loss to Sheamus at WrestleMania, which was
Ooh.
also one of the big things that started the Yes movement because people were so unhappy with the shake he got in that match.
And yeah, dude, I like Sheamus a lot, but man, that was nonsense. I was
Yeah,
not here for that. I did not enjoy that at all.
yeah, I hated it. But if that doesn't happen, then maybe the Yes movement never happens. And there's so many other things that led into that. Of course, concurrently, Roman being pushed as the face of the company, and fans very much did not want him because they wanted Bryan. And I think a part of that helped to push Bryan to the forefront and helped to get him in that spot going into WrestleMania 30. But yeah, the retirement and everything afterwards. Why I say that, sometimes things are supposed to happen the way they happen is because Bryan, for a long time, was seen as a very, very good wrestler that didn't have the character stuff together, that couldn't cut promos. And the best thing that could have happened for him was staying those years and being the general manager where all he could do was character stuff and all he could do was cut promos. And he got so much better as a talker during those years because of that. Uh, I mean, the Talking Smack segment, I mean, first of all, Talking Smack was great in itself, was just him and Renee. They were great together. They had great chemistry together. That era of Talking Smack was just incredible to watch. But of course, the Talking Smack segment with The Miz, where Miz cuts that promo that has been basically one of Miz's career highlights. But that also led to a lot of stuff with Bryan, where Bryan was doing all of this character stuff, like him doing the rap segment with the Usos. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
There are so many things that he did during that time to help him grow as an on-screen character and a talker. And if that stuff didn't happen, um, maybe him coming back when he did out of retirement wouldn't have hit as hard as it did, because I will just never forget in the build up to WrestleMania that year, um, out of nowhere, we started getting word that he could be coming back, and him cutting that amazing promo where he says, "You fight for your dreams, because if you fight for your dreams, they'll fight for you." And the camera comes out, and he's under the WrestleMania sign, and I'm just like bubbling like a fucking kid, like, because I'm just like, I never thought he'd come back. And that promo is just so beautiful, and just the sentiment of it is just so amazing.
And he's kept to that line too. He's used it since then as well, right?
He's used it a few times. He used it during the heel run as a Planet's champion, which was also phenomenal. Um, if you would have told me, again, there's so many twists and turns his career has gone on, like him coming back um, and cutting that promo before WrestleMania 34, I believe that is.
That sounds right.
Okay, yeah. So him cutting up, yeah, that's right. Because WrestleMania 34 was in New Orleans. WrestleMania 30 was also in New Orleans.
Yeah.
But so if you'd have told me him cutting that promo ahead of WrestleMania 34 and then going on and for some reason doing this tag match with Shane McMahon that we don't speak of, and
Ooh, yeah. Let's don't talk about it.
but then also having the feud with Big Cass after that, and all of this other like middling stuff as a baby face. Like, I would have never guessed with just how incredible that moment was of him coming back and cutting the promo and coming out of retirement. You would have thought this is going to be the biggest baby face in the world. But for some reason, they just couldn't find a way to get him going. And so when he has the match with AJ for the WWE Championship and he turns heel, I'm just kind of looking around like, but Bryan's like one of the most beloved wrestlers you have. Why would you turn him heel? That I don't
Exactly.
understand. But it ended up being one of my favorite runs he's had over there as champion. I actually think that's his best WWE championship run, is the Planet Championship stuff, and him
Yeah.
with the hemp belt and like
Yes.
coming out and cutting those heel promos. That's where we got the famous Fickle promo.
Yes.
And of course, him playing a part in Kofi Mania and putting Kofi over at WrestleMania 35. Just, man, that was just such a great run for him as champion.
I used to call that the tree bark title. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
he, look, I was with you when they turned him heel. I'm like, I don't know what the F we're doing now, but good Lord, that was fun. And, Kofi put in the work. We don't have to talk about how he lost it. Still ridiculous.
Yeah.
But he put in the work. But man, kudos to Bryan, who didn't do Kofi any favors. Kofi had earned it.
Yes.
But man, he just made Kofi look that much better too.
Well, if you remember, coming into that, it looked like that was going to be Mustafa Ali's spot.
That's right.
And that of course played into Bryan being a big supporter of the cruiserweights in 205 Live. Also, while he was retired, he also had that the commentary he did during the Cruiserweight Classic, which was also great.
Awesome.
Um, but yeah, he was a big advocate for the cruiserweights, and Mustafa was one of the guys that he wanted to get behind, but unfortunately, he got injured coming into the build of WrestleMania, and that's how we got the Kofi run. And as the story goes, the rumors goes, Bryan was the guy that pushed for Kofi to get that spot. Kofi has said that himself in multiple interviews that Bryan was the guy that pushed for that. And as a black man, as a fan, and just uh, knowing how much Kofi Mania meant to me, not just as a black fan, but as a longtime fan of Kofi's, that made me even more of a fan of Bryan's, that he spoke up for him and he helped him get that moment. But also, when you look at it, he did it twice. He put over Kofi at WrestleMania, but also was a part of giving Swerve like one of the biggest highlights of his career this year at All In.
Ooh, well done. Yeah. Well, he's a pro, man. Like, and we didn't even, we haven't yet talked about who trained him. I mean, Shawn Michaels trained him, at least his school did. And depending on who you believe, he wasn't quite there all the time, if any. I think his name was just on the sign outside, honestly.
Yeah.
But Danielson's an old pro, man. So he came up at least understanding and respecting the business. And, William Regal is also listed as one of his trainers, as was Antonio Inoki in the Inoki Dojo, which also is a huge thing, as is Rudy Boy Gonzalez. I mean, he had the right trainers. He had the right philosophy. He genuinely wanted to do this and wanted to be the best he could at it. And never flashy, never the biggest guy in the ring, never the best promo, never the best music. When they first gave him that music in WWE, I thought, is this a joke? But the more I saw him with it, I thought, you know what? I think it's okay. I think it's okay. And then it became, now I can't envision him not using this music because
Yeah.
he just made it his own. But like, dude, that run, I got to talk to you about this Yes Movement thing because I don't want us to just glaze over it. You and I have said this before, probably not just talking to each other, but independently of each other too. We've always been under the assumption that company didn't want to put that title on him. And that's what I've always heard. It's what I've always read. How do you know what's true and what's not? But that they were backed into a corner because, dude, you remember everywhere they went, the crowd was chanting his name when the dude wasn't even there.
Yes.
Like, and chanting, yes. I mean, Phil, are you of the mindset that, oh, for sure, they didn't want to do this, but they felt compelled to, they didn't have a choice?
Yeah, I definitely feel like they were trying their hardest to not give Bryan the moment, but it was one of those things where the support for him just kept getting louder and louder until it was just undeniable. Like they couldn't look past it. I mean, it's similar to what happened this year with the "We Want Cody" stuff, but to an even higher degree. Like the Yes Movement at its height, like it was just undeniable, man. Like there was no getting past it. You had to give him his moment, and that just goes into everything we know about WWE, the company. He's not the guy that they usually push as a top guy. He's
Yeah,
not he's
sure.
not their handpicked guy. Like he's a smaller guy. He wrestles a very indie style. He doesn't wrestle their house style. Um, the idea of someone like him going there and succeeding sounded impossible at one point. And that was some of the mystique around Punk as well. Of somebody like him, not just an indie guy, but somebody that was smaller and had tattoos and all these other things. They don't fit that mold there, and so I think that is absolutely one of the hallmarks of his career, that he forced their hand. He forced them to push him because he was that likable as a wrestler.
Hmm. Yeah, they didn't have a choice. I mean, there was at sporting events all over the country, at NCAA basketball games, in the NBA and NHL, the crowd was chanting yes. I'm like, what are we doing? Like, dude, it became. I mean, Phil, in my opinion, you can only label, I think maybe on one hand, the number of times we've seen this, since the days of the territory days kind of coming to an end. I mean, Stone Cold for sure. I mean, there may only be, I don't know, I'd say Zack Ryder to a certain extent, where the crowd is telling you, here's who we want, give him to us. Like, man, there's something to be said for that, dude. Like, can you imagine if they hadn't pulled the trigger? Would it have just been a matter of we don't have a choice eventually? What happens if they say no to that? They just insist on not doing it.
I just don't see a world where you could have. I don't see a world where you could have not made him champion and given him his moment.
Mm.
Because the outcry for him was just too large. You just couldn't ignore it.
Huge. And, we've said before that whole authority angle, that Phil, his victory should have split the authority. It should have ended the authority angle, and it did not.
Yes.
God, that thing lasted forever. It went on like a year after he lost the belt, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, but that also goes into another thing we were talking about going into this podcast, and how if you have a hated authority figure, you need to have a baby face across from them that is like white hot, that's that beloved, that justifies it. McMahon had Austin, and they had Bryan. Bryan was just so hot by the end of that run that there's no getting around it. You had to push this guy.
Had to push him. Yeah, he's got that quality. He's got that I hate to use the word underdog because it's been done to death. And Phil, in that company, when the old guy was in charge, his way of pushing a baby face was, well, in a year we'll push him for 10 minutes, but in the next 12 months, we're going to destroy him. We're going to bloody him. We're going to embarrass him. We're going to make him do crazy things on the air. We're going to jump him with 6 other guys. We're going to do it in front of his parents in his hometown. We're going to make him lose big matches he should win. Like, dude, that company, Phil's got a really warped idea of how to get a baby face over. At least they did.
Yeah, I mean, they always had their way of if the fans got behind someone, it's like, okay, well, we'll give them something for a while, but then we're gonna get back to what we really want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly thought that's what was happening with Bryan Danielson. I truly thought that they're not going to do this, and when they did it, I was overjoyed. I'm like, it's so cool, so cool that they did it. And plus, he beat Batista and Randy Orton in the same match at WrestleMania.
Yes.
So coming out of that, and the retirement, and of course he comes back from that. He has the run against Kofi, and I don't mean to, minimize anything, kids, because I know there's a lot of stuff, and I don't really want to leave out. But another big moment that I got to talk about, Phil. It remains one of the loudest moments I've ever heard, and I've been watching wrestling since Dusty versus Rick as a kid. One of the loudest moments I ever heard was the night in the cage against Bray Wyatt.
Yes.
Dude, they were perfect opponents for each other. That storyline was awesome, man. What a great thing, dude. It was so much fun to watch.
Yeah, man. I think the stuff that he did with the Wyatt family is another one of those big highlights of his time with the WWE. And his turn and the culmination of that in that cage match was so good. And you're right, man. That when he eventually turns and he starts doing the yes chant,
Yes.
man, that crowd was so loud.
Oof.
But man, and he had the great match with Bray towards the end as well. With the Fiend when they had their feud together, and to this day, I still think that strap match they had was probably the best match that the Fiend had with anybody.
And I don't know that Danielson's ever said this out loud. Maybe he has. But I suspect that there was a lot to be learned from Bray and Bray from Danielson, you think?
Yeah, for sure. Because Bray had a lot of the things that Bryan did not. Bray was such an intriguing on-screen character, and man, one of the best talkers I've ever seen. So I definitely think that he learned some stuff from Bray.
Yeah, Bray had that stage presence for sure. And, you talked about everything kind of happening for a reason with this guy. Like, everything that he went through and everything that happened to him and for him and around him made him into the guy he is today for sure. Do you think, and this is me kind of bouncing around. Do you think that he has leaned too far into this neck injury stuff since he arrived in AEW? Because they've done those spots where he'll lay there twitching and where his hands are going numb and like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, dude. There's moments I'm like, yeah, we need to maybe not do this anymore.
Yeah, I've just come to the conclusion that Mike Gold is a sicko, and he enjoys torturing us as fans by doing these doing the seizure thing he did at one point, which I'm just like, dude, it's too close, man.
Yeah.
It's too close to reality, man. And so every time he does these neck things, or he's like trying to like see if he has feeling in his fingers, I'm just like, dude, I've seen you run headfirst into a barricade, and I've seen you have to be taken out of a match because of neck injuries and concussions. I don't want to see you play with that. And I mean, I get it's wrestling, but it's scary every time he does it. And he's done a few things now where you can tell he just enjoys messing with fans. Remember when he got his leg caught in between the ramp and the ring?
I
And
do. Yeah.
he came out and he was selling his leg like he was injured, and everybody thought he was really, really hurt.
Yeah, he's playing with you. Fencing is what they call that posture, right? When it looks like you're stiffening, you know?
Yeah.
Man. By the way, don't know if you know this, in an interview, I think it was this week, Stone Cold came out and said that he didn't believe in all that CTE stuff. He's not a CTE guy.
Uh,
What?
it was very interesting to watch because on one level they showed it, and if you watched it, it's from the Mr. McMahon documentary.
Oh,
And
okay, yeah.
yeah, it's from the Mr. McMahon documentary. So he says it, and he's talking about the Chris Benoit stuff. That's how he gets into it.
Mm.
And so he's talking about it, and while he's talking about it, they interlace in the footage of him getting dropped in his head, which, is the notorious neck injury that, completely changed his career. And
Mm.
so when he's saying this and he finishes, he's saying, yeah, I'm not a CTE guy. And he starts like scratching his ear and fidgeting. And they linger on it for a while. And I'm just like, I don't know what to make of that. Are you just saying that in a moment because that's what you want to believe? Do you honestly believe that? Or are you just trying to say that uh because you honestly don't believe it? I don't know, man. I don't know how to read that. There's some interpretations there, but the way he's fidgeting, you can tell he's very uncomfortable with the subject.
I found that to be a little out of left field and not knowing what to make of it. And look, I know the part of the comment was it's a guy's fault because I guess he's alluding to the fact that, you don't know how to bump or that you're not
Yes.
protecting yourself. The guy you're working is not protecting you. And I'm like, I know there's a shred of truth to that, Phil, but concussions happen in wrestling anyway. Regardless of how safe you are, they can still happen.
Yeah, and I get the intent, like you're saying, behind it, that he's saying that if you're constantly getting concussions, you're doing something wrong. So what he's really saying is, because this is not a real sport. This is, you're supposed to take care of each other out there. So if this
Mm.
is constantly happening, then maybe you and whoever you're in the ring with are not taking care of each other. But also, accidents happen, and this is again as somebody that unintentionally got dumped on his head and has had multiple neck surgeries, and again completely changed his career, completely changed the way he wrestled. So it's kind of hard to take that from him, particularly like, wait a minute, you you in particular, your career was forever changed by something that was just an accident.
Mm. Yeah, it's just, you know, to the Danielson stuff, as we said, I just don't like it. And wasn't there a list of things that AEW as a company said, don't do it this anymore? And that was on there as well?
Yes, I remember that whole thing where they put that list out where I don't know how official that was. It was one of those reports that came out that this was a backstage edict.
Yeah. Who knows? Because I think other things on that list have since come to pass again as well. So, yeah, again, I just don't. And, when the ref throws up the X, which has traditionally always meant that there's someone's really hurt, now they just do it so you can fool the fans. I'm like, could you take 2 seconds to stop trying to fool the fans with an injury? Like, You don't have to go to the extremes. Just lay there and sell your arm like it's hurt. And there's a possibility I might believe it's hurt. You don't need to go to this extent, dude. But
Yeah.
Danielson coming in, again, we were both there the night he came in. I don't know if I could have said how long he would last, if he was going to retire there or whatever. But we had to talk about this AEW World Championship run. You said to me, I think it was about the middle of this year, that you felt that they were going to build toward Danielson getting the title. And there were things that were starting to happen that pointed to you being right. And of course, that's what happened.
Boink Studios is the home of Tom Clark's Main Event, Tom Clark's 6M podcast, and Two Nations Under Ted, a Ted Lasso podcast. Visit the site today for links to every podcast platform, social media, special announcements, and a lot more. Check out the site and bookmark today, boinkstudios.com.
I don't know that I know anything about what they're doing right now. Everybody's got a title shot. And you know what I mean? Which is weird. I got one. I'm sure you got one too. We've all got one. And again, Phil, they're reminding people on a daily basis, well, we don't know how much longer this guy's going to be here. Do you have any idea what in the world is happening with this title run? Is this guy going to be here? What's happening? I mean, I think we both think he's going to lose to Mox. Of course, it looks like that's what they're building to. But what part of this is working for you, honestly?
I think the journey to it was very good. I think the aftermath has been kind of a convoluted mess.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like the idea that they used his entire AEW run to build up to this, because the story from year one is he came straight in very arrogant. I'm going to beat everybody. I'm not coming in to, help any of these people. I'm here to beat everybody. And he immediately got humbled. I mean, you think about him in the first match with Hangman, where he's in there doing the push-ups and the jumping jacks, and that leads to a time limit draw. And then the second match, of course, Hangman beats him. And so every world title match he had after that, he lost. He had a few Ring of Honor World Championship matches with Jericho, couldn't beat him. Couldn't manage to beat MJF, and he took him all the way to the limit in a great Iron Man match. But that was the first time that it really showed him, like, I don't know, can I still do this? Like, if you remember after that match, he had to go away for a while because he said, maybe it's just time for me to go home.
Yeah.
And just this idea of, all right, I don't know how much I can compete on a level with these younger guys anymore. And just how scary the idea of something happening in that ring and I may not be there for my family. And so starting that story last year with that, and then continuing to build it, and then getting it to this year of him very much, again, still arrogant, coming out and challenging Will Ospreay and saying, I'm the best in the world. You're not the best in the world. And if you're going to come in here and say that, then you got to beat me. And it mirrored what he did when he first came to the company of challenging Kenny Omega, because him saying, I have to test myself against the best to prove that I'm the best. And that match at Dynasty, which is one of the best matches I've ever seen in person. Just amazing match. But just that matchup, Will Ospreay coming in, and this is not a guy that you could out wrestle, that you could come in and put holds on and outmaneuver. This guy is faster, stronger, and more hungry than you. And at every turn where you thought you had him, he hit you with a counter or beats you out on a move. That, of course, the iconic move of them standing in the corners and Ospreay's pulling his elbow pad down to do the hidden blade, and Bryan is trying to muster up for the psycho knee, and he just completely gets beat out by this hidden blade. Just gets clobbered by it, and then the match ends with the Tiger Driver. And it's again this idea of like his mortality and his humanity coming into play. Like, man, I'm 40 plus at this point. Can I still do this? And then, of course, that leading into the beautiful story of him entering the Owen Hart Cup and winning that, and everything that meant. Just like the legacy of Owen Hart and being able to finish up his run with this kind of company, winning the Owen Hart Cup, and then that leading to his match with Swerve. and Swerve being like, "Hey, this is great. I know that you want to finally get your moment here. You kept losing. You're begging for one last shot, but you're not just going to come and beat me.
Right.
You're not going to just take this away from me. This is mine. I did everything to get here. I'm not just going to hand it over to you." And just how great that story played out and how great that match was. All of that was great. The aftermath of this, I thought straight away, right after, because I mean, the same night of him coming in and proving that he could finally do it and getting one last shot, the same night, Nigel McGuinness came back to wrestling and took part in the gauntlet match, and he lost. And so I
Mm.
thought easily the story coming out of this is the next night is Nigel was going to challenge him for the belt, and we didn't get that. We got the Jack match instead, which kind of came out of left field, and the match was fine, but it just kind of felt like, all right, where are we going with this title run? Where are we going with the story? Um, but you also had really cool things that they did, like in the celebration for All In, and him having all of the Blackpool Combat Clubs. For some reason, I was about to say Bullet Club. All the Blackpool Combat Club guys around him. The only person was missing was Jon Moxley. And of course, Jon Moxley comes out the next night and he cuts the very cryptic promo of "This is not your company anymore." I'm intrigued. Um, I wish that they would have gotten to the story with him and Mox in a more concise way, because
Mm.
there is such a great dynamic between them. Uh, Bryan was the guy that challenged Mox, and he challenged him to be better, and that was how we got the Revolution match and William Regal coming in, and that eventually led to the start of the Blackpool Combat Club and everything they've done together as a group, and Moxley's legacy as a champion, all these other things. So there's such a great story coming into that, and I wish they would have done it in a more concise way. But you have all this other stuff like Mox is challenging somebody else that was already number one contender for their title shot, and Christian Cage is looming with this contract.
Mm.
It's just a bit too much, but I do think that story of them using all of the continuity from his first year in the company all the way up to his eventual run at All In was very beautifully done.
Mm. Yeah, dude, the run up is fine. The aftermath is pretty chaotic, to say the least. You segue for me. The Blackpool Combat Club. This is with Regal. It is a collection of proper villains, but
Yes.
in a fun way, right? Regal leaves very unexpectedly, in my opinion. At least it sure felt that way. Like he's gone. Regal's a straight shooter. I don't know if you ever listen to his. He's not doing his podcast now because once you sign with WWE, they own your soul and you can't do anything else. Yeah, you're gonna call your mom. You better ask for permission first, right? But his podcast was good because it was just him being honest, and every episode was just him telling stories, and he's got no reason to lie or to make himself sound better or whatever. And so, like, you got all this coming to the forefront. People love him. You know, he's always been the villain, but he does such a good job at it. And this collection of wrestlers with Wheeler Yuta, who we knew from Ring of Honor, the old Ring of Honor, now he's a made man in that company. What do you think about the addition of Danielson and them building? I was going to call it a tribe, but building this stable from the ground up, dude. What's your thoughts on the BCC?
At one point, they were the best heel faction in the company.
Hmm.
They were just so much fun to watch. Him and Mox together was just a lot of fun, and then you add Wheeler Yuta, the way Wheeler Yuta eventually joined them. Well, strike that. Before that, just the way that they started it with Regal coming down as a guy that has history with Moxley, and Bryan as a guy that helped to train them, and him coming down and giving them some old Inoki strikes to the face,
Mm-hmm.
um, and getting them in line, and then they became a trio at Blackpool Combat Club. But then Yuta's storyline with them, the way Yuta joins, and him initially being a part of Best Friends and hanging out with those guys, and then going, no, I want to be taken seriously. I want to learn from these guys, and basically having to be jumped into the group. um, One of my favorite things with Yuta in that run up to him joining Blackpool Combat Club was him getting in a ring and going to shake Regal's hand, and then Regal just slaps him very, very hard, and he jumps in Regal's face, and right afterwards, Bryan jumps in his face like, "Yeah, you want this, right?"
Yeah, yeah.
Like just the way he jumps in his face afterwards, and he's looking at him like, "Yeah, this." So, but yeah, that all of that build up of him getting jumped in and his journey with them being pure champion, becoming an absolute little uh annoying brat as a member of the group.
Yes.
He's so great, man. He in his storyline with them, and initially Bryan saying that he wanted three guys. He wanted Yuta, Daniel Garcia, and Lee Moriarty. Um, and then having the stuff where Garcia joins Jericho instead and becomes a sports entertainer. That back and forth and how those faction warfares went was really, really good. The stuff
Mhm.
between Garcia and Bryan was very, very good. I wish that they had paid it off better, but the story of it was very, very good because we got so many great things like the crowd chanting "You're a wrestler" at him, um, and they had a trilogy of very, very good matches. We got very, very good pure title matches out of Yuta and Garcia's rivalry out of that as well. Blackpool Combat Club was a massive success for AEW. I think that it's kind of undersold how successful it was.
Dude, I can't agree with you more. Great faction, great little stable. And look, this is still Danielson, but it's kind of adjoining as a topic. I mean, John quit using Wild Thing. Now he's using his Death Rider music from New Japan. Love that music, by the way.
Yes.
Underrated too. But like now, Marina Shafir is involved. Pac is, of course, part of the group because of the trios championships, and I get it. What reason is there left to still refer to this as BCC? And what is coming? We keep hearing about something's coming. If you only knew what was coming, I don't have time to explain that kind of thing. I mean, if it's not an affiliation and like a corporate power move, like with a Shane McMahon or whatever, what are we moving toward? And how do you think Danielson factors into that storyline?
I think they're doing some really cool stuff. I did not mention how great Claudio has been as a part of
Oh,
Blackpool
for
Combat
sure.
Club was as
Yeah.
well. This has been some of my favorite stuff he's done. That run he had as a Ring of Honor World Champion, where he was a heel, was also great.
Mhm.
But yeah, man, we're saying like the aftermath stuff. It's been a bit clunky, but that turn at All Out was very, very well executed. Um, they come out and they stand along the ringside to stop Christian from cashing in, and then they get in a ring and they look like they're gonna celebrate, and Claudio's like it's almost like sharks in the water. Claudio's like circling around, and you can see Mox give him the nod, like yeah, now gives him the uppercut, and again, this is just how much Bryan as a character and everything has evolved because his reaction to the uppercut is so good. He has those big eyes, like he's staring around, like "What's happening? What have you done?" And then immediately the bag goes over his head, and he's getting strangled and choked out. Such a great optic, man. Uh, what a crazy, what a crazy turn of events. But also, this is such a Bryan thing to do. The idea of him going out this way, and again, the tie back to what I said earlier, the way he got released initially from WWE uh, was him joining the Nexus and choking Justin Roberts out with the necktie. And so another group that is now going to send him away, essentially, and probably is going to end up retiring him. It starts with a guy choking him out.
Yeah, yeah.
Very poetic. I thought that that was very, very well done. Some of the other stuff around it has been not the best, but I think this story with him and Mox has been very good so far. Where I think this is going, I think the logical conclusion to this is Moxley retiring him in Tacoma.
Yeah.
I do think that the Wrestle Dream match is going to be his last match as a full time competitor, and I think that Bryan knows enough about this business, and he loves wrestling enough to not want to be a guy that goes out on top. If he goes out, he wants to go out on his back, and he wants to put somebody else over. I can't see him wanting to go out still as champion and vacating that belt. He's gonna want somebody to get the rub of beating him. And he's also told us multiple times now that uh, Tony had to force him into getting his moment at All In because he did not want to be champion.
Mm.
That's part of why I know that I built up the story of him finally getting his moment and him losing all of those title wins, but he didn't want to be champion. I think that that's a big part of it, and that's a big part of who he is as well, and just why he means so much to his company. Him coming in and having the big matches, but also having the foresight of knowing like this isn't about me. This is about giving that wrestler uh, a highlight or giving this wrestler a spotlight that they wouldn't have had before. But yeah, I think this is all leading to Mox beating him and retiring him.
Do you think the better story, Phil, was in the chase and him getting very, very close, X number of chances, and he doesn't win? Or do you think there's a better story with him having the title?
I think the story of him winning the title was very good. So it's hard for me to say that like the chase is the real story, but the title win, it doesn't need to be a long reign. And him having the belt up to Tacoma and dropping it, I just wish they would have handled it better. Um, uh, I wish that they had done with more with Garcia in this last run because Garcia was such a big part of the Blackpool Combat Club stuff. So it kind of almost feels like Garcia is kind of like the heir apparent in some ways. And there's also what kind of bothers me with the Darby stuff. If you built up Darby having these two title wins, I mean these two title shots, but to me, it almost makes more sense for Darby to be the guy that beats him in Tacoma because he's also a Seattle guy.
Mm.
You've told us that he's one of the pillars of this company, and if you're also trying to tell us that how important it is to Bryan to continue to give back to this company, it would have made more sense for him to give the win to a pillar on the way out, right?
Of course, for sure. John doesn't need it.
No, I mean, it of course adds to John's legacy as the ace of this company and just how big his run has meant to this company. For my money, the best AEW World Champion. Period. I think his 3 runs, he cemented a legacy with the company. But I don't think he needs that win either. I think you could have easily given that to Darby or somebody else. And it hasn't happened yet. We could be wrong, but I do feel like that's where this is going.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the pillars. Man, we are so far removed from that speech. We're so far removed from that idea. Like, we still know what's happening with Sammy. Like, that could be a whole other podcast by itself.
He's a tag team champion with Dustin Rhodes.
Sure, but like, why? And where, not on the main show. I love Dustin, don't get me wrong. But like, not on the main show,
2 belts, Dustin, man.
2 belts, Dustin, 2 belts. And, Jack Perry, who you could argue next to MJF is probably the most successful of the 4, but in terms of where he is, like who he's hanging out with on live TV all the time, which are the EVPs. Do you think this whole with the whole 4 pillars thing, like you said, I believe that it also should end with one of those guys. I guess it should have been Darby, but Phil, I'm scratching my head. I still don't understand what in the world they're building toward. And it's okay that Phil that I can't figure it out. I like to be surprised, but they keep saying something's coming. I have no idea what they mean. And like John's like, I got to get my hands on that belt right now. Like right now. And I'm thinking, why? Just tell us. But I don't know, dude. The whole thing, imagine if this doesn't lead anywhere. Imagine if it's a letdown or if it's, I don't know, all this work for no payoff, Phil. That would suck.
Well, I mean, you could look at it like this is all him saying something's coming, and it's not necessarily that a threat's coming, like another wrestler's coming. It could be that there's going to be a day when Bryan is not here. This isn't his company anymore. He's not even signed to this company anymore. He's technically not even an AEW wrestler anymore. But he's holding our championship, and somebody has to grab that baton from him and take the reins. And I think Mox just sees it as, I have to be that guy because I've always had to be that guy. There's going to be a day when this guy is not here anymore. And who are you guys going to wait on? Are you going to wait for this guy to show up? Are you going to wait for this guy to show up? Or are you going to wait for this guy to uh, grow into the wrestler you keep telling us that he's going to be, or that guy to eventually emerge? No, I'm the guy. It's always been me.
Mm-hmm. Such a bizarre little storyline. Again, as we started off this episode off talking about Danielson winning that title, it's just such a bizarre thing. Like, well, my contract's over when I'm going to win a title. All right. Okay. But then, like, I don't know, dude. And it's through no fault of his own or anything like that. But the whole thing just still seems bizarre to me. But having said that, that match he had with Swerve at All In, dude, man, was that the match of the year for you?
It's between that one or the match with Ospreay. It's one of the two. But just the storytelling going into the Swerve match was just so good. The match itself of Swerve, I think Swerve is great because wrestling does this thing a lot where if somebody's a heel, they turn them babyface, and then we're supposed to forget everything that they did as a bad guy, and we're just supposed to move on because they're getting cheered now. But I love that Swerve has remained a complex character. That his whole point of contention is, hey, I don't want to have to do any of this stuff. But if this is what I have to do to get to the top, then I'll do it. If it's me or you, it's going to be you. And that I love the idea of building up the storyline with both guys' matches with Ospreay, where Bryan had to match with Ospreay. Yeah, Bryan had to match with Ospreay, where Ospreay put him on the shelf for a little bit, and that softened Ospreay. And then he comes into the feud with Swerve, and Swerve's just like, you can't come in here playing. This isn't a game to me. This is serious to me. And if my position in this company is threatened, if you're coming for this belt, you got to kill me.
Right.
If it's me or you got to go. I'm not here to play games. I'm not here to make friends. And so tying that into the Bryan feud of him going, hey, man, I'm a Bryan fan. And if I didn't have this belt, I would be just like the rest of these fans, clapping and hoping you get your moment. But that's not what it is. This is my moment. I'm the champion, and I'm not just going to lay down so you can have your moment in the sun. And I loved everything about that. I loved all the segments coming into it. But, man, that match, just so many great moments. Swerve absolutely torturing this man, beating this guy down multiple times in the match, beating him down in front of his family and dancing, dancing in front of their faces and laughing. Great stuff. His kids are like crying and they're just like dancing in front of him. Really, really good stuff. When he starts to hulk up in that moment where he's beating him down and hitting him with the yes kicks, and he's looking at his family and looking at him, and he's saying, I love you, while he's standing up, and then just blasts him with this chop. Just, man, so good. Just such a great moment.
What a great fire up. And him yelling down to his family and talking to him in the middle of that Hulk up. Jeez.
Beautiful stuff, man.
So good.
When he's getting hit with those house calls as well, and he's reaching towards the corner where his family is, and he's starting to get up, and before he can get up, he just gets blasted again with a house call. It's just so many great moments like that. Mirroring that moment that I talked about earlier, where they're both corner to corner. Bryan's in his corner trying to charge up for the bicycle knee. Same spot he was in with Ospreay, but this time he doesn't get beat out. He hits him with the bicycle knee. Man, just so many great things. Or him trying to hit Swerve with the bicycle knee, hits him dead on his chest, and backs up into the corner and just walks back and brushes it off like it's nothing.
Man, that was Luke Skywalker next level, brushing it off your shoulder, dude. That was crazy. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Reddy's Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. And you know what? In that moment, I thought Strickland's a made man. Like, again, as if anybody needed any more convincing this guy's a main event star. That, to me, right there, should have solidified it beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, but that's what I was saying earlier, and he didn't lose to Swerve, but man, he made him look like the man in defeat. He made him look like the biggest obstacle in his way. He made him look like the final boss that he needed to get past.
Yeah, good call, the final boss. I love that idea. Yeah. Well, look, Khan, as I said before, Khan believes he's not going anywhere. And Tony said a bunch of stuff that is proven out to not be quite true or whatever. But you seem to agree with him that Bryan Danielson's not going anywhere. Do we see him as an on-air character? Do we see him as a backstage? I don't know if I'm using the word producer. I don't know what they do in that company. How do we see this moving forward? Let's assume he does lose to Mox this year and it's over full time. What do you think happens from that point on?
He's going to wrestle again. I don't think that him retiring here means he's never wrestling again. I think he's just done doing a full-time schedule. I think he's going to come back and wrestle. I would not be surprised if we see him wrestle in another Continental Classic, to be honest with you.
Oh, interesting.
I think that he will wrestle for this company again, just not in a full-time capacity. I think he's still going to be on as a part of like maybe the creative staff or maybe the advisory for Khan as well, because Tony has said multiple times that he trusts him more than anyone else. So I think that he'll still be a part of like the backstage of the company, even if he's not on screen. But I don't see him being an on-screen character like commentary or general manager or something like that. Again, I do think that he'll be off TV for a good amount of time, and he'll just appear again out of nowhere to have matches every now.
Yeah. Well, look, I hope it's right, and I don't have an axe to grind against WWE. If he were to split, and we see him in 2025 accepting Hall of Fame nomination, and they put him in, and then he doesn't come back. Look, stranger things have happened, and it's fine. I still like the guy a lot, but like, I kind of hope that we don't. What Hall of Fame induction you assume is going to happen at some point, Phil, but it doesn't mean he has to come back and work for them or sign a Legends deal. It just means that he's on loan for the evening. They get to take their photo ops. He gets his ring. Then he's back on AWTV the following Wednesday. I'm okay with that. I mean, but regardless of what happens, man, let me ask you this. Speaking of WWE, had he not left, because talk about what this did for his image, Phil, if nothing else. And you hit it on the head earlier. WWE's an underdog, fighting from behind every time he wrestles. But he came into this company with swagger, well-deserved, reminding people, hey, before I ever got to WWE, I was the American Dragon. That's who I am again. Are we calling him the best in the world right now if he had stayed in WWE?
That's a good question, because I do think that the last 3 or 4 years have added so much to his career.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if he had just ended it with the WWE run, that's still an all-time great run. I mean, just everything he accomplished up to that point. But being able to leave and still do so much for AEW, like his time in AEW wasn't just like he showed up for a cup of coffee and, he had some good matches here. He was a big part of this company for the past 3 years. And not just showing up and being a big part, but also putting over guys that were also instrumental to this company. Like giving MGF that win was huge for MJF.
Yeah.
It solidified him that year as a worker. It's the same thing with Hangman. He solidified Hangman as a champion. I mean, that was what, his first title defense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but he solidified him. I mean, he gave a lot of guys big moments. I mean, what he did for Daniel Garcia, what he's done for Yuta. I mean, the character stuff with Yuta trying to save him at All Out and tearing up while the other Blackpool Combat Club was just watching him on the ground where Mox is basically trying to murder him. Um, just man, just such a good moment for Yuta, and that's going to be one of those things that people remember. Um, he's done so many. I mean, what we just said, what he did for Swerve and at All In, he's done so many great things for guys over there for this company. Um, I definitely think it adds to his legacy. I mean, the Okada matches. That Jesus Christ,
Oh my God, no kidding.
the Okada match at the Dome was just man amazing.
Yeah,
That was this year. That was this year.
crazy. Yeah,
The Zack Sabre match he had at I think that was Sakura Genesis or no, was it New Beginnings?
yeah.
It was New Beginnings. Also amazing when and what that did for Zack. And Zack coming into this as one of the greatest technical wrestlers and being able to say that you beat Bryan. And yeah, I think for me, Bryan is my GOAT, man. And that could be just like my own my own bias at this point, but man, there's hardly anybody that I could put over Bryan for my personal enjoyment.
We mentioned Garcia earlier. I always thought that would have been an interesting fit, and for whatever reason, they didn't go that route. Do you think that when the dust settles with all this world title business, they could circle back to that? And since Garcia's, I guess, babyface now, however that works in that company, I mean, do you see that maybe as like, well, I'm going to mentor you, or I want you to mentor me the way you wanted to last year, or whatever that looks like? Because to me, that would work fine.
I think the thing stopping that currently is the contract stuff with Garcia, because he's still his contract status is still up in the air.
Does he re-sign, you think, or no?
I don't know. I keep wanting to say yes, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure why he hasn't just resigned because
Yeah.
there's clearly a contract in place and there's clearly negotiations in place. I don't know what is the hesitation to sign other than he might be thinking about leaving.
Yeah. Jeez. I mean, anything could happen, right? But God, it just seemed like it was the right fit for BCC and everything else, and then it didn't happen for whatever reason. But
Yeah, he stayed with Jericho too long, in my opinion.
oh yeah, it didn't. It did him well in the beginning. I do not think it did him well the last quarter of the time he was with him.
Yeah,
So yeah, just too much, just too much. And again, another subject for another day. But in terms of guys who have come in that were not, homegrown AEW talents, right? Besides Sting, has Danielson been the most impactful, you think?
yeah. I think it's Moxley, Sting, Bryan.
Well, yeah, you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Moxley coming in was just huge for them. Coming in at their first ever pay per view, Double or Nothing, and just how big of a moment that was for him coming in and everything he's done so far. Him being champion going into the pandemic and him taking the reins after all of the Punk controversy and getting things back on track. Every time you gave him the ball and every time you needed somebody to step up, he did it.
Yeah, dude, I can't argue that. I mean, he's been great for them. I think it's just, I don't see any downside. Look, we kicked this off by saying he's one of the nicest guys in the business. I don't see any downside to him having been there at all, like at all. And we can't say that about every talent. But man, he's done nothing but help them, Phil, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, of course, some injuries kind of hampered him a little bit, but man, when he was there, he gave them everything he had. I mean, I didn't even mention the other young guys. He gave moments the Ricky Stark strap match last year. Just how great that match was. A lot of stuff he was trying to do on Collision. He's been great. I mean, even if you want to get into the advisory stuff he's done behind the scenes and him being the guy to step in, like we gotta let this guy go. It's time. It's what's best for business. You know, that's always gonna be a controversial subject, but him being the guy, even with their history together, feeling like this is what we need to do. This is what's best to just move on. You got to respect that.
And, Punk always thought of him versus Danielson as being the feud you could go to anytime you wanted to, but that they should never lay hands on each other in the meantime. Stay as far away from each other as they can because they'll always make magic in the ring. And is there a way that we ever see those two guys hook up on live TV again, or is it done?
I think it's done, unfortunately. I hate that we didn't get that match when Punk was there.
Yeah.
I think it's done. I don't see how it could possibly happen now.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, look, if you had to call it, and it's a lot of matches to think about, right? But can you possibly narrow down this is the guy's best WWE match and this is the guy's best AEW match? It's hard, isn't it?
Best WWE match. That's hard.
Yeah.
The
one with Punk was great, but
yeah, the Over the Limit match is definitely one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can say that's his best match though.
Yeah, that is not easy because he was there for 10 years, man.
Yeah, I mean, beating Cena on SmackDown, that was a big one. That was SmackDown, right? Or was it Raw?
I want to say it was Raw, but you may be right.
Well, whichever TV match that was, I'm drawing a blank. I want to say it was Raw, but whichever. Beating Cena on TV and just how big that was at the time, that was incredible, and that match was great. I don't know if I would say it's his best match though. It's definitely one of his best moments. He has some really good ones with AJ. That's very hard. His best WWE match. That's very hard.
Yeah, it's a lot. Again, 10 years is a lot to plow through, a lot to get through. The stuff with Bray was, you couldn't call those matches clinics by any means, but
no,
they had such a history together, and I think they played extremely well off each other. I personally preferred the Bray Wyatt thing to the Fiend, if I'm being honest, but I preferred that. But I mean, Daniel had, stuff with Seth. He had stuff with Nakamura, the Kofi stuff, of course.
Yes.
God, man, he wrestled everybody while he was there, honestly.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what is his. I mean, if you twist my arm, it's probably either the Cena match or the Punk match. But I don't know how much of that is just my personal bias of like I like those three guys, but it's probably either the Cena match or the Punk match.
Well, AEW, the choice maybe won't be quite as difficult because you could argue he had it this year.
Yeah. The Cena match that I'm thinking of, by the way, is probably a SummerSlam match. That's probably his best WWE match, if I had to guess.
Let's see here. When was that?
That was SummerSlam 2013? 2013.
Oh, wow. That is going back, isn't it? Yeah. Again, kids, 10 years is a lot of time.
I'm trying to think. But again, he has some great ones with AJ. The match where he won the belt, he turned heel. That was a very good match.
That SummerSlam against John was 2013. It was on August 18th.
Okay. The Kofi match at WrestleMania is also very good.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't know if I would say that's his best match. I really think it's probably the Cena match at SummerSlam. That's like I said, if you twist my arm, but depending on what day you ask me, that might change.
He did have a lengthy feud with Orton as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, gosh, from September 27th, 2013 up through October, for almost a full month, he wrestled Randy.
AEW, it's not as hard, but man, this year he's had so many very good ones. I mean, it's probably either the Swerve match or the Ospreay match.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll throw in Okada as well because that's, man.
That first Hangman match also is very, very good. I mean, the Kenny Omega match also very good.
Yep.
I'm gonna say the Ospreay match is probably his best AEW match.
And again, had he not left that company, he doesn't get to do any of these things.
Yeah. But yeah, Zack Sabre match he had this year is also good. He had a Zack Sabre match with AEW. Was that at Wrestle Dream? That was also very, very good.
Well, when he left, didn't he say something to the effect of he wanted to work some Japan shows, and they told him no.
Well, if you remember, that report came out that WWE was interested in partnering with New Japan. And the whole reason that they were doing that is because they were trying to convince Bryan to stay. And so
That's right.
they were trying to tell him that they would let him go and compete in the G1 or something because they were trying to convince him to resign.
Right. I mean, it was time, wasn't it? I mean, do you think it could have went either way? And like, could you have envisioned him staying? Because it kind of felt like the time had come.
I was glad that he left. I was glad that he went and tried to do something else. Because he's basically done everything he needed to do with WWE.
Yeah.
So I was glad that he tried something else, and I mean it paid off because like the AEW run has been tremendous.
Oh my goodness. No kidding. Let's see. His last match was SmackDown for the Universal Championship.
Is that the career versus title match with Roman?
That was, it's not listed as that, but I would think it would have to be because that was, let's see, SmackDown April 30th, 2021. That's when Roman was champ.
Yeah.
Yeah, defending against Daniel.
Yes, that was a very good match as well. That and the triple threat match he had was also very good.
I mean, dude, WrestleMania 37, when Roman beat him and Edge in the same match, didn't he stack those guys on top of each other at the end?
Yes.
Dude, when I saw that, I'm like, I may have dropped a few curse words at my TV. Like, was that necessary? Like, come on, man, right?
Yeah, I'm not thinking of that triple threat match. He had another one with Roman. I think that was Fastlane.
Fastlane 2021, he faced Roman. Edge was the enforcer.
Okay, that's the match I'm thinking of. It wasn't a triple threat. Edge was just the enforcer. That match was really, really good.
Yeah. Well, you know, Roman's their guy, kids. What can I tell you? Roman's their guy. So
stack him, smash him.
Yeah.
That match was fine. I kind of think it should have just been Bryan versus Roman, but Edge won the Royal Rumble that year for some reason that I didn't understand.
Yeah, same. Very weird these guys end up in the same company again, dude.
Man, and Copeland was doing great, I thought, until he decided to jump off the top of a cage.
Sure. That can sometimes be bad, I imagine. Yeah. And, you know, look, isn't it funny, too, how two different guys who were told you'll never wrestle again did in the same company?
Yeah, all of them. Same thing with Saraya. All of them ended up in AEW. Sting
Very
as well.
true. Very true. Yeah, good call. Yeah. Kids, it just goes to show you, there is life after WWE. So
apparently there is life after you have multiple neck surgeries.
You know, it doesn't hurt Phil that these guys take incredible care of themselves. And this isn't, and I grew up in the 80s and love 80s wrestling. This isn't 80s wrestling where sometimes the physiques are not quite as, you know, awesome. And there's steroids everywhere, right? Like, you know, a lot of guys live and eat clean now and really take care of themselves. And the biggest addiction they have is Xbox, you know, like, so, I mean, it's a different world, man. You heal faster. John Cena's a freaking nature, dude. The way that dude heals, are you kidding me? Like, I mean, it's something needs to be said about, you know, taking care of yourself, and it helps quite a bit. Human body can withstand a lot of stuff, and Danielson's living proof of that, man.
Yes. I guess I should ask because I've heard this conspiracy multiple times. How much stock do you put into this idea that they already knew he was going to get cleared, and they were just trying to, because we always kind of get this narrative that they were trying to protect him from himself and keep him out of the ring because they didn't want him to get seriously hurt, or, you know, God forbid, like something fatal happened to him in a ring. But there's another, you know, conspiracy to it that they always knew that he could get cleared eventually. They just didn't want him to leave. And so if he knew he could wrestle, he probably wouldn't have re-signed and he would have just left.
Well, look, without using the Google machine at this moment in time, I do recall him saying that he had, I think it was 2 to 3 doctors independent of that company saying yes, no pun intended, saying yes to his return. And the WWE physician was the only one saying no, but since that was the one that mattered, he was stuck.
Yes, that's eventually how he forced their hand because he just went and got more and more people that approved. He kept getting, um, a second opinion, and they all were saying he could wrestle.
I think if the answer is, somewhere in the black heart of the old man that used to run that company, he truly didn't want to see a guy like Danielson who really did not have an agenda, who was a good person and wasn't up to no good. He generally did not want to see that guy hurt. I'd like to believe that, but I also think maybe it's more along the lines of we can't afford for something terrible to happen on a pay-per-view again, like it happened with Owen.
Yeah, I think some of it. I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there were some health concerns there, but I also think that eventually they realized that there was a good chance that he could leave and wrestle somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And if he could, because the way I look at it is, if you're telling him, all right, well, it's okay that you can't wrestle, we'll keep you signed to a contract where you don't have to wrestle, but we'll pay you to be an on-screen character. He doesn't re-sign that contract if he thinks I can go and get cleared and potentially wrestle somewhere else. If the only thing that's stopping me from wrestling is you guys just won't let me wrestle, well, fine, I'll go somewhere else where somebody else will.
Mm.
And I think that that's what it eventually forced their hand as well, because he kept coming back with, all right, this doctor says I can wrestle. And so by the end of it, it's the same thing that I said with them saying, well, sure, we'll look into you being able to work with New Japan, just stay here. I think that they were trying to do everything in their power to keep him from leaving.
I think that's true. And I don't know how much of what we're speculating on is what the mix is. It's 50-50, 60-40. I don't know. But I think a lot of different things are coming into play. And when you own the company and the buck stops with you, and it has since day one, that the doctor's going to do whatever you tell him to. And if he had told the doctor, under no circumstances do you sign off on him, then that dude's going to do that.
Yes. Because correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't his contract up at the beginning of 2019?
Possibly.
I'm pretty sure his contract was up. I think it was at least coming up at the end of 2018 or something like that.
Look, that as a company, you can't fault a company for wanting to do what's in their best interest. But at the same time, Phil, this guy gave you his body on a nightly basis and entertained fans all over the world and was responsible for, you could argue he was responsible for a good bit of that gate as Mania that year. Like, they tend to sell Mania regardless of who's main eventing. But you can't tell me, Phil, a lot of people didn't buy tickets at the last minute because they wanted to see him win that title.
Yes.
So, maybe do right by the guy and hear him out. If you've got licensed physicians and you've got like a handful of them saying, no, this guy's fine, let him work. Let the guy work, right? I don't know.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember which year it was. Maybe it wasn't 2019, maybe it's 2020.
And look, every time we start talking about what year it was, in my head, I go to the pandemic. That's the first thing I always go to in my head. So, like, 2020 is the year of the pandemic, if that helps you.
Yeah. Oh, I can't remember the timeline of it, but his contract was up. And he could have left and he resigned because it coincided with AEW, because he technically, if he didn't resign, I think it was 2018, because 2018 was the year of All In. So if he would have left, he could have been on that card for All In.
Interesting.
I found it. Here's the quote.
Yeah.
He says, "It's really interesting because my contract was up in 2018. I was considering going to Ring of Honor. I was talking to the Young Bucks and I was talking to Cody just to see what their contracts all were in Ring of Honor. And I was like, well, what are you guys going to do?" That's what it was. And as we know, history here is they went on to have All In 2018. If he had left and gone to Ring of Honor, he probably would have been on the card for All In.
Wow. You imagine that?
He says, even my lawyer who doesn't know anything about pro wrestling, he said, hey, I don't think you should sign with Ring of Honor if these young bucks aren't going because they have this YouTube show called Being the Elite. I don't know if you have heard of it. It's essentially the driver of popularity of Ring of Honor. So if these guys go away, we don't know if Ring of Honor will be as popular. Then with Cody's contract coming up, if they leave and Cody leaves, what will Ring of Honor's popularity be? So essentially, those conversations broke down, and he eventually signed the contract in 2018, which led to him being on contract into 2021, and he left in 2021. But he possibly could have left 3 years earlier and been a day one AEW guy.
Wow. That's fun to think about, man.
I knew it was something like that. I just couldn't remember the timeline of it, but it was 2018.
Yeah, that's fun to think about. I mean, I am not a big believer in that everything happens for a reason kind of stuff. I just think there are coincidences, and I think the timing just happens to play out. But what you said about this guy when we started today kind of makes a lot of sense. Like, the way timing worked out for this guy, you could argue that it was right place, right time or whatever, but man, things just seems to sort of click along at the right times for him. And like, I just think we've had a better time of it as wrestling fans getting to see this guy perform. And, he genuinely loves what he does. He loves wrestling. When he fires up on the stick, he's very good. We know what he can do in the ring. Dude, he's total package, man. Like I just don't really have anything negative. I just don't. I can't even think of anything to make up. Like, the guy's just awesome. I just respect his work, and I think he's done so much for the business that, I feel like he'll be talked about for years to come. I don't know if I was going to compare him to Luthez, but I'm trying to think of somebody that we talk about years after the fact. Dude, I think he'll be one of those guys, man.
Yeah, I think he's definitely an all-time great. He's a legend. Even if you don't want to say he's the greatest of all time, he's an absolute legend. And you think of the three companies that he has had a time period with and how beloved he is for all three of those runs. And not a lot of wrestlers get to do that, get to have like great runs, signature runs with three different companies.
Yeah, dude, we didn't even really talk about his Ring of Honor run at all. Like, we didn't mention the Nigel McGuinness stuff, which you and I talked about off mic, that I still don't understand what in the world the point was for all of that. I mean, I just felt like it was cobbled together, and Danielson never cut a promo on Nigel through this entire thing. I still don't understand that at all. But as I said to you earlier, Phil, it's not going to hurt him. It's not going to hurt Nigel.
I think it's great that we got to see those two wrestle one last time.
Sure.
Because I would have never imagined that we would get to see that. I would never imagine that we would get to see either of these guys in a wrestling ring again at one point. So to get to 2024 and they're both well enough to wrestle, and these guys got to wrestle each other, and the match was excellent.
Yeah.
But just even that closing moment of him forcing Nigel to tap out and he yells, "Thank you." That clip of the guy yelling, "This means something to me. This means something to me." This man, I was thinking that the whole time watching it, like, man, this is just beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I appreciate the match. Don't know where in the world, again, I won't lament the fact, but like the stuff that sometimes happens in this company, I just can't wrap my head around. It's fated to be one of them, Phil, I guess.
Yeah, it's wrestling. Everything isn't perfect.
Sure.
But yeah. I mean, the amount of things that he's managed to do in 2024. I mean, the Okada match, the Zack Sabre match, getting to have the match with Ospreay, getting to have this match. And I mean, when Ospreay had the match with him at Dynasty, and he was talking about how much he meant to him and how much he inspired him, and he told that story about how his dad used to take him to see wrestling, and so he took him to like this hole in the wall wrestling when he was a kid, just because he wanted to support him. And he was surprised by the end of it that Bryan Danielson was on this card, because that's how much Bryan loved wrestling, is that he was a part of like all these little small indies that he was just like, what are you doing here? But seeing him at that show is part of what inspired him to wrestle, and go full circle and be a guy that wrestled in his final year as a full-time competitor after that. It's incredible.
Yeah, it is. Kids, I think we're going to wrap it up right there. Here's what I'll tell you. We've done episodes similar like this on the show before. And we did one for Sting, we did one for Cody, where we sort of just talked about them. And then we came back like a year later or 2 years later, whatever it was, and revisited the subject. And we may do that with Danielson, depending on how this plays out here. For all we know, that surgery won't happen this year. Maybe something will stop it, or he will. He'll just get completely decimated by Moxley as we think he will. And that'll be the end of that. We won't see him until February of next year when he's on TV for something. But who knows? We will just have to wait and see how this all plays out. And if we don't address it here, we'll probably address it on Tom Clark's Main Event. And you are completely welcome to subscribe to that podcast, and we'd appreciate it if you would. But in the meantime, Phil, let's see if we can wrap this up. Difficult as though it may be, what is your last word on Bryan Danielson?
Easily in the conversation for, if not the greatest of all time. Easily one of the most likable and talented wrestlers ever. A guy that had just all the makings of a great worker, but somehow by the end of this, because of the timeline of his career, become a full package, become a great talker, become a great entertainer. Cody Rhodes taught him to be a great liar. Yeah, what a career, man. What an amazing career. I mean, just thinking that this was going to get cut short at some point, and he came back and had a whole nother run with WWE, and then like I said, signature run with AEW. Finally got to live out his dream of going to Japan and wrestling in the Dome. It's an incredible wrestler, man. The guy that, like you said, has made us like terrible music. Flight of Valkyrie is now synonymous with this guy. Final Countdown. Yeah. I mean, I'm getting emotional just thinking about things like sitting in the United Center and screaming Final Countdown to the top of my lungs because I love this man so much.
Yeah, look, he's one of a kind. I mean, we are a far cry from the days of Michael Cole trying to bury this guy. And all due respect to Cole, he was told to bury this guy on live TV and call him a nerd and a hippie and a vegan. And he doesn't even own a TV. I remember him, he doesn't even own a TV. And I'm like, why are we still talking? You mention it every time you talk about this guy. Stop,
Yeah. But I mean, the fact that he got to take all of those things back as well towards the end of his time with WWE, right, as Platinum champion. Like I always think about him. I think it was Albuquerque they were in, and he's cutting this promo with like this big hot dog loaded with all of this stuff. And he's like, you see this? This is what people eat. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Fickle. Yeah. Again, we're a far cry from the really short hair to the goat, the beard. Dude. Yeah. So good. The Yes Movement, the stuff with Bray, stuff with Kofi, everything he did in that company, and then coming to AEW and truly being that trusted veteran, that respected veteran, that guy that delivers every single time he's in the ring and does it like very, very few others ever have, really. And I'm with you. I think for his generation, he is without a doubt one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest. And then in the talk of all-time greatest, he's got to be in the running long term. And whenever they write the book on that, kids, don't be surprised to see Bryan Danielson's name. And as I said, when there's more to talk about and more to address, we'll do that on one of these podcasts anyway. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, at least for now, that is Bryan Danielson. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.